Okay. The morning it happened, I was standing at the sink, rinsing out my coffee mug, watching the sprinklers tick across the backyard the way they always did on Tuesday mornings. I had that small, quiet feeling I sometimes get in the early hours. The kind where nothing is wrong yet, where the day still belongs to you. I remember thinking I needed to call my daughter. Her birthday was in 2 days. I dried my hands on the dish towel, the yellow one with the little embroidered lemons that she gave me 3 Christmases ago, and I picked up the phone. She answered on the 4th ring. "Hey, Mom." Something in her voice was off. Not rude, just flat, the way a door sounds when it closes in an empty house. "I just wanted to call early," I said, "before the week gets busy. Birthday girl." There was a pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. But I felt it the way you feel, a step that isn't there. "Mom," she exhaled, "we're actually not doing anything this year, just the 4 of us. Felix thinks it's better if we keep it simple." Sheelix, her husband. 3 syllables I had learned to carry carefully. "I wasn't asking to come to a party," I said, and I kept my voice even. "I just wanted to say happy birthday." I know you did." Another pause. "I'll call you next week, okay? We're just really focused on the kids right now." She hung up. I stood there holding the phone, and outside the sprinklers kept going, tick, 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 like nothing at all had changed. I should tell you something about my daughter before I tell you the rest, because if I don't, you'll think this story is simple. You'll think she's a villain, and Felix is a villain, and I am just some poor woman who got left behind. It isn't that clean. Her name is Annette. She was the kind of child who made strangers stop and smile. Not because she was loud or charming in that performing way, but because she had this stillness to her. She listened, she remembered things. When she was 7, she sent a handwritten card to our neighbor, Mrs. Fenton. When she was 7, she sent a handwritten card to our neighbor, Mrs. Fenton. Fenton's cat died, and she addressed the envelope herself in big, careful letters, and she used her own stamp. I raised her mostly on my own after her father left. Not all at once. He left in stages, the way water drains from a tub. Slowly, and then all at once. By the time Annette was 12, it was just us. We ate dinner together every night. We watched old movies on weekends. We had a shorthand that didn't need words. She met Felix at 26. He was tall and quiet and had a job with a title I never fully understood. Something to do with acquisitions. He wasn't unkind to me. Not at first. He shook my hand firmly the first time we met, and he said, "Annette has told me a lot about you." And I thought, well, that's a good sign. I told myself a lot of things were good signs in those early years. The first time I lent them money, Annette called me on a Thursday afternoon, and her voice had that careful, rehearsed quality that told me she had practiced the ask at least twice. They needed help with the down payment on their house. Not all of it, just a bridge, she said. Just to get them across until Felix's bonus came through. $22,000. I said yes without thinking. Of course I said yes. That's what you do. That's what I believed. Then that family was the place where yes came before the question was finished. The bonus came. They did not mention the money again. I did not ask. A year later, it was the minivan. Felix had found one he wanted, a specific model in a specific color, and could I just cover the difference between their trade-in and the new one? $9,000. I said yes. Then it was the preschool deposit for my grandson, Eli. Then it was the fence for the backyard. Then it was the thing with the investment that Felix said was a sure thing, and he said it with the absolute certainty of someone who has never been wrong in front of you before. I am not a foolish woman. I want you to know that. I worked as a bookkeeper for 31 years. I know what numbers look like. I know what a ledger says when things don't add up. But there is something that happens when you love someone deeply, when you have watched them sleep, when you have held them through fever, when their face is so familiar to you that you see it in strangers, and that something makes you very, very bad at arithmetic. I said yes to the investment. $14,000. It was not a sure thing. Eli was born 2 years into the marriage. He had Annette's stillness and Felix's square jaw. And when he looked at me the first time in the hospital, I felt something unlock in my chest that I hadn't known was locked. My granddaughter Petra came 19 months later, red-headed, loud, opinionated before she had words for opinions. For a while, maybe 2 years, maybe 3, things were good. I drove over on Wednesdays. I brought groceries. I took Eli to the park while Petra napped. I was useful, and I mistook being useful for being loved. I'm not the first grandmother to make that mistake. Then the Wednesdays became every other Wednesday. Then they became, we'll let you know. Then I started getting texts from Annette the night before, usually after 9 o'clock, with some reason or another. Eli had a cold, Petra was cranky, Felix had people coming over for work, and the house was a mess. Not an invitation for me to help with the mess, just an explanation for why I shouldn't come. I started keeping a small log, not out of bitterness, out of instinct, the way a bookkeeper notices things. I wrote down the dates I visited versus the dates I was turned away. I wrote down when Annette called versus when I called. I wrote down the things Felix said at family dinners, the little editorial comments he made about the neighborhood I lived in, about the car I drove, about the way I dressed. She means well, he said once, to Annette, not to me, while I was standing 6 feet away putting on my coat. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't have to. He had decided I wasn't quite present enough to require lowering. I drove home that night and I sat in the driveway for a long time. The phone call on her birthday. That was not the beginning. I want to be clear about that. It was just the moment I finally stopped explaining it to myself. I had been explaining it to myself for 4 years. She's tired. He's stressed. They're young parents. They have a lot going on. I'm being too sensitive. I come from a generation that expects too much from our children. I should give them more space. I should call less. I should want less. I had gotten very good at adjusting my wanting. But something about hanging up that morning, about the sprinklers still going outside and the yellow dish towel and the 2 days before her birthday that I would now spend not driving to her house with a cake, something about all of it at once made me sit down at the kitchen table and just stop. I didn't cry. I was past the kind of hurt that cries. This was a different kind, quieter and more certain. The kind you feel when you finally understand something you've been refusing to understand. I thought about the money, not with anger, just with clarity. The way you look at a column of numbers after you've been avoiding it and you finally add it up. $63,400. Over 6 years. Not counting the groceries, the gas, the Christmas presents, the time. I sat with that number for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and I called my friend Doreen. Doreen has been my friend for 38 years. She was the maid of honor at my wedding, which tells you something about her loyalty because she has never once said anything unkind about my ex-husband to me, directly, even though I know she has a list. She's the kind of woman who tells you the truth slowly, so you have time to absorb it. I told her everything that morning. All of it, the down payment and the minivan and the investment and the Wednesdays and Felix saying, she means well. In front of me like I was a piece of furniture with good intentions. Doreen listened without interrupting, which she almost never does. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. How's your will set up? She said. I hadn't expected that question. The same as it's always been, I said. Everything to Annette. And your house? Is it in a trust? I said no. Another pause. I want you to call someone, she said, not a therapist, a lawyer, an estate attorney. I want you to do that this week. Doreen, it's just, I know what it is, she said. That's why I'm telling you to call. I found the attorney through a referral from my accountant, a man named Bernard who had done my taxes for 12 years and who I trusted because he always told me things I didn't want to hear in a way that made me feel like I could handle them. Her name was Catherine Marsh. She had an office downtown on the 4th floor of a building with old wooden floors and a window that looked out onto a courtyard with a single oak tree. I noticed the tree because it was one of those things you notice when you're nervous. You find something steady to look at. I sat across from her with my hands folded and I told her what I'd told Doreen. And unlike Doreen, she did take notes. Quick, efficient notes with a pen. She clicked 3 times before she started writing. When I finished, she put the pen down. "You have a couple of things to address," she said. "Not unkind, but not gentle either. Direct." I appreciated it. "Your will, your accounts, and your property. We're going to look at all 3. She asked me questions I had never been asked before. Whether anyone else had access to my checking account, whether I had ever signed anything related to my house that I hadn't read fully, whether I had a healthcare directive and a power of attorney in place. I answered each one slowly, and somewhere around the 3rd question, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not sadness, something colder and more useful than either. I was paying attention. Finally, completely. I don't know exactly when Felix started watching the money. I think it was gradual, the way most things are. First, he asked, casually, at a birthday dinner, what kind of retirement savings I had. Then he mentioned over Easter that he had a financial advisor who was very good, very discreet, someone who worked with older clients and helped them streamline things. He said streamline the way someone says it when they mean something else. Then, about 8 months before the birthday phone call, Annette asked me to add her as a joint account holder to my checking account. "Just for emergencies," she said. "In case something happens to you. So I can take care of things quickly." I remember looking at her face when she said it. She believed what she was saying. I am certain of that. She was not lying to me. She had just been living inside Felix's framing for so long that she had forgotten it was framing. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 3 months. Then I stopped thinking and started noticing. I looked at my accounts. I looked at the paperwork from the investment, which I had never looked at carefully, and I found something in it that made my hands go still on the kitchen table. Felix's name. On one of the secondary forms, as a point of contact. I had not put his name there. I had not authorized his name there. I did not know how his name had gotten there. Catherine Marsh looked at the paperwork for approximately 4 minutes before she looked up at me. "This was added after you signed," she said. "I thought so," I said. "This needs to go to a different kind of attorney than me," she said. "But we're going to get you there. First, let's make sure everything you have is protected." Over the next 3 weeks, I changed things quietly. I updated my will. I set up a revocable living trust for my house so that it would pass clearly and directly, not through probate, not through any process that could be delayed or disputed. I changed the beneficiary on my retirement accounts. I set up a healthcare directive with Doreen as my proxy. I changed the passwords on every account I had, and I wrote them in a small notebook that I kept in my bedroom inside a copy of a book Felix had once said he found very tedious. I did all of this without telling Annette. It was the first time in her life that I had done something significant without telling her. It felt strange. It also felt like breathing. About 2 weeks after I finished everything with Catherine, Annette called. Not a text, an actual phone call, which was unusual enough that I sat up straighter when I saw her name. "Mom," she said, and her voice was different from the birthday call. Softer, slightly uncertain. "I've been thinking about you." "I've been thinking about you too," I said, which was true. "Felix and I have been talking," she said, "about the future, about making sure everyone is taken care of. We think, it might make sense for us to revisit the conversation about the account. And also, we were wondering if you'd ever considered a reverse mortgage on the house." I looked out the window. The backyard was bright. The sprinklers weren't running. "Annette," I said carefully, "who brought up the reverse mortgage, you or Felix?" A pause. "We talked about it together," she said. "When did you start talking about my house?" I asked. Still careful, still quiet. Another pause. Longer this time? We're just trying to plan, she said. I know, I said. I've been doing some planning of my own. I did not tell her what kind. Not then. I wanted to give her time to hear her own voice, separate from his, and figure out what it was saying. I've had a lot of time to think about where I went wrong. I know some people. I have read the comments on the kinds of stories I'm telling now. I know what people say. Think that a woman in my position has no one to blame but herself. That I enabled this, that I created the situation by saying yes too many times, by making myself too available, by building a relationship where my value was measured in dollars and babysitting hours. They are not entirely wrong. I did enable it, not because I was weak, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if I said no, she would love me less. Afraid that my usefulness was the thing holding us together, and that without it, I was just a woman she used to need. That fear is not an excuse, but it is an explanation, and I think if you have ever loved someone who seemed to need you to be smaller than you are, you understand it. I should have set boundaries the first time, the second time. Certainly by the third, I should have had my estate documents in order years ago, the way any sensible woman in her 60s should. I should have noticed Felix sooner, or rather I noticed him and chose to explain him away, which is a kind of not noticing. I am 67 years old, and I am still learning how to stop apologizing for knowing things. The last conversation I want to tell you about happened in October, a Saturday, cool and overcast, the kind of day that smells like rain even when it isn't raining. Annette came alone. No Felix, no kids. She knocked instead of using the key I had given her, which told me she knew something had shifted even if she didn't know what. I made tea, and we sat at the kitchen table, and for a while neither of us said anything difficult. Then she said, "Mom, are you okay? You've seemed far away." "I'm here," I said. "Things have been strange," she said. "I know the birthday call was." She stopped. Started again. "Felix thought it would be better if we had our own traditions. Just the four of us. He thinks it's important for our family unit to have its own Annette." I said her name the way I used to when she was small and had said something that wasn't true. Gently. "Just a calibration." She stopped. "I love you," I said. "I will always love you. That's not something Felix can plan around or manage or restructure." She looked at me and her eyes filled in that way they used to when she was trying not to cry in front of me because she thought I needed her to be okay. "I made some changes," I said. "To my accounts. To my will. To how my house is held. I should have done it years ago. That's on me. But it's done now." She was very still. "I also spoke to an attorney about the investment paperwork," I said. "The form with Felix's name on it." The color changed in her face. "I'm not going to make this ugly," I said. "That is not what I want. What I want is my daughter back. The one who wrote a condolence card for Mrs. Fenton's cat. That girl is still in you somewhere, and I am patient enough to wait for her." I paused. "But I will not wait with my accounts open and my house unprotected. I hope you understand." She didn't say anything for a long time. She wrapped her hands around her mug and she looked at the table, and I watched her face move through several different things. Finally, she said, "I didn't know about the form. With his name." "I believe you," I said. And I did. I don't know what to." She stopped. "You don't have to know right now," I said. "You just have to think. Separate from him if you can. Just think for yourself for a little while." She left an hour later. She hugged me at the door, longer than she had in years. I held on too. I am not going to tell you it resolved neatly after that, because it didn't. She didn't leave Felix. She didn't call me the next day with some grand declaration. Life doesn't work that way, and if a story tells you it does, it's leaving something out. What happened was slower. A phone call the following week. just to talk, no agenda. A Wednesday visit in November. She brought the kids. Eli had grown 2 inches, and Petra informed me immediately that she had lost a tooth and needed me to be very impressed, which I was. Felix and I have not spoken about the paperwork. His attorney sent a letter. My attorney responded. That process is ongoing, and I will not pretend it isn't unpleasant, because it is. There are days when I am angry in a deep, tired way. There are days when I drive past the kind of houses that remind me of theirs, and I feel the loss of it. Not the money, the loss. The family dinners that were almost warm. The Christmas mornings where Eli climbed into my lap and Petra made everyone wear paper crowns. I still have the yellow dish towel. It's a little frayed at the hem now. I keep it anyway. What I know now at 67 that I did not know at 60 is this: love is not a ledger. You don't earn it by keeping your balance high, but you also cannot love someone so much that you disappear. Somewhere between those two things is where I'm trying to live. My house is mine, my accounts are mine. My aim is on everything that has my name on it, and every Sunday morning, I make coffee, and I stand at the sink, and I watch the backyard, and I let the day belong to me for a little while before anything else begins. That is not a small thing. It is actually quite a lot. I have been thinking lately about the word enable. People use it like it's simple. Like the person who gives too much just didn't know better, or didn't have the backbone to stop. But I think it's more complicated than that. I enabled what happened with Annette and Felix, not because I was naive and not because I was weak. I enabled it because I loved her, and because somewhere along the way I decided that my love had to come with a price tag to be believable. That if I stopped paying, she would stop feeling it. That is the thing I got most wrong. The actions we take out of fear tend to produce exactly what we feared. I kept giving because I was afraid she would drift, and she drifted anyway. Not because I gave too little, but because I had built a dynamic where my presence was measured in usefulness rather than love. That is not something you fix by giving more. It is something you fix by stopping and asking, what are we actually doing here? I did not ask that question for 6 years. By the time I did, $63,000 had left my account and my name was on papers I barely remembered signing. The cost of not asking is always higher than you think it will be. What I know now, and what I wish I had understood at 55, at 60, at any point before Catherine Marsh sat across from me and clicked her pen, is that protecting yourself is not a selfish act. It is a prerequisite for everything else. You cannot love well from a position of depletion. You cannot offer anything real to another person when you have spent so long making yourself smaller that you have lost the shape of yourself entirely. Doreen asked me about my will before she asked me how I was feeling. At the time, that surprised me. Looking back, I understand it. She was asking me whether I still believed I was worth protecting. That is the real question underneath all of it. Annette is not a bad person. Felix is something more complicated, and that situation is still unresolved. And some days I am angrier about it than others. But Annette, she got lost. She trusted someone who gradually rearranged the furniture of her thinking until she couldn't remember what the room had looked like before. That happens to good people. It happened to her. My job now is not to rescue her, because I cannot do that. My job is to remain someone worth coming back to. Courage for me has not looked like confrontation. It has looked like a Tuesday morning phone call to a lawyer. It has looked like changing a password. It has looked like sitting at a kitchen table by yourself and adding up numbers you have been avoiding and deciding that the truth, however uncomfortable, is something you can actually hold. You get to decide what your life is worth. Not your children, not their spouses, not anyone who has ever said your name like a footnote. I decided. It turns out that's all it takes to start.